management. Those are the codes that determine in Medicare how much they're actually going to receive. And all private insurance companies typically reimburse doctors based on the Medicare fee schedule that that doctor has in place. So they'll pay 97% of Medicare, 102% of Medicare. Typically it's less than 100% unless the practice has been there a long time. And the diagnosis code needs to match the procedure code, because that can cause a claim to be kicked back. And if a claim is kicked back, it can be audited, which means the insurance company may send someone into the practice to look at a whole bunch of charts to see, you know, why are you billing this at the inappropriate rate. The nice thing about coding is this is a huge area where the new generation, I call them next generation EHR products, have automated so much of this, that if the doctor puts in a specific diagnosis code and then a procedure code, the software will go, whoa, nope, that's not going to work. That doesn't match. And some of these systems actually have some artificial intelligence modules that monitor specific insurance companies and may come back and say, Blue Cross Blue Shield doesn't like this combination. Blue Cross Blue Shield likes this combination better. So they're doing what's called pre-scrubbing of the claim, which means that the rejection rate goes down to nothing. And in terms of these CPT and E&M codes, particularly with primary care, here's what happens. You know, if a patient comes in, and let's say it's a 55, 60-year-old gentleman, and he's there, he's being monitored for chronic hypertension. He gets his blood pressure checked every 60 days at the doctor's office. So the doctor comes in, he's had his vitals taken, doctor asks him a few questions, listens to his heart, looks at what the BP reading was, maybe takes an additional BP reading standing as opposed to sitting, and then comes what we call the doorknob conversation. The doctor's ready to leave, and the patient says, oh, by the way, doc, it just occurred to me, I got this thing on my leg I want you to look at. The physician looks at it, lo and behold, yeah, probably be a good idea to take that off, send it to the lab. And so now the doctor's ready to sign off on the electronic progress note. The progress note, the good software will come back and say, wait a minute, you had already coded this as a 99213, which is an intermediate sort of procedure code, or E&M code, and it pays a certain amount of money. But because you did a different review of systems and you did another procedure, you can bill this as a 99215, which is more money. Now the doctor can override it and say, I don't want to do that. But the beauty behind this software is it does the same thing Medicare or any other private insurer auditor would do. They count points. There is a system of points having to do with the review of systems that you do, the number of procedures that you do, the questions that you ask. And once that's documented and your payer, your insurance company comes back and says, I'm not sure about this claim, you can just point to the form where the points were counted up within the workings of the software and say, you don't even need to send anybody out here. This is a 99214, no matter how we count it. So that is huge because according to MGMA, the Medical Group Management Association, physicians leave about 15% of their total potential revenue on the table because of undercoding of those E&M codes. So this is huge. Once again, this is another way to get those nostrils up higher above the waterline for primary care physicians. Great selling point. Then comes the bill submission, and typically a super bill is nothing really super or magical. It's just the place where all the information gets gathered and consolidated in order to push that claim towards the payer for processing. Typically what you need there is information about the provider, the PIN, the provider identification number that Medicare issues, or the TIN, the taxpayer identification number, name of the practice, information about the patient, information about the visit, those diagnosis and procedure codes, and then the super bill gets submitted, and typically it goes to the clearinghouse, and the clearinghouse does a intermediate sort of check. And if there are no issues, it goes right to the payer, and the payer issues payment. You guys are business people. You'll appreciate this. In 2008, there were $20 billion worth of Medicare reimbursements made via check, paper check, that got printed and mailed out and shipped to a physician's office and then processed as a paper deposit and sent to the bank. Now, Medicare would much prefer to do an electronic funds transfer, But you can't believe how often I'll say that to a practice and they'll say, well, well, what would Mary do? Because she opens the mail and she puts the deposits together. Yeah, at the end of the year, it may not seem like a lot of money just in terms of the time value of money, but it is. And you can show that to a physician. And again, it becomes a great selling point. Then there's bill tracking and posting. Once you've submitted a claim, you need to be able to track, gosh, I sent this batch to the Blues. I sent this batch to Aetna. I sent this batch to United Health. Have I gotten anything back? Have any claims been bounced? Have I gotten the explanation of benefits? Have I gotten a payment and so forth? You want to be dealing with your denials as quickly as possible so you can get those dealt with and resubmitted. And then payments, I just told you my EFT story, and errors. And it's really important, and good software will begin to track the kinds of errors that practices are tending to make so that they can be documented and dealt with. As they tend to be issues of human error. You've got a doctor who's used to, I always code a chronic sinusitis as a 214, which may or may not be a good practice. Then we have the AR management piece, and this gets sticky because lots of times the folks in the doctor's office don't really have the training and the skills to deal with this piece. They don't like the prospect of having to call a patient and say, your balance is now 90 days old or your balance is 120 days old. But in reality, this, particularly given the economy the last couple of years, this has become a real issue. Some third-party billing companies, and there are a scat of them out there, and the vast majority of small practices use them. Some third-party billing companies only go so far as to collect the data and submit the super bill for you and to deal with some of the denials. But sometimes they deal with everything soup to nuts, including collecting balances from patients, the actual billing to the patient, and dealing with the AR, and even dealing with placing accounts for collections after a certain amount of time. There are people that are really good at collecting delinquent balances and people that aren't so much. And what we've seen in a lot of cases is that after about 90 days, if the balance is that old with an individual patient, it's going to be fairly difficult to collect that money. And so you need to be prepared to have a conversation like that with the physician practice, to ask them, what are you currently doing? What are you tracking your collection rate on your delinquent balances? Because all of this is costing money. Have you considered using a third-party collection agency? What is your financial arrangement with them? Typically, that arrangement, is a percentage of whatever they collect. But there are some collection agencies out there that have gotten pretty clever and that are collecting on a basis of $10 per claim no matter what, unless they have to go to the up close and personal level, my cousin Guido is going to give you a call kind of level, and then they do a percentage. So this is another opportunity for you to sit down and have a consulting kind of relationship with the practice or with the practice manager. This is an area, and I've talked a lot about this in the last, couple of months or so. Billing companies are, many of them are kind of in the buggy whip business now because the capabilities of this new generation EHR software, most practices will pay anywhere, for a small practice, 6, 7, 8% of net collections to their billing company for taking on this responsibility. With the features and the functionality within the new software, most of my clients are bringing their billing back in-house because they can do it for a fraction of what they're paying a third party to do it because it's become so automated. This is one of the strongest selling points that you can make with a practice prospect, because the typical conversation usually goes something like, okay, I'm thinking about buying or licensing the software as an end user and putting it on a server in my office, which, by the way, I don't recommend to even my larger practice clients anymore. I would probably not tell a practice with fewer than 50 doctors to go that way because it's expensive, it's problematic. I know that's not good news to you guys if you're in the business of selling boxes and licenses, but really software as a service is where it's all headed towards the cloud, guys. And the resellers that can figure out a good means by being an MSP or some other way of being financially successful in that model, you guys are going to clean up, because that's where it's all headed. But typically they'll say, I'm evaluating a big chunk here. HIM says that to buy a server and run the software locally in your office is going to cost on average between $38,000 and $63,000 per physician for adoption and implementation, and $18,000 per physician every year thereafter. To go into a software as a service application, I may pay as a small practice, a doctor, a couple of mid-levels, a couple of clericals, I may pay somewhere between $7,000 to $11,000 on the upfront for implementation and setup fees, and for pulling some of my data over from my legacy system into my new system. And then I'm probably going to pay somewhere between, for one doctor, somewhere between $700 and $1,200 a month as a subscription fee for everything I need. Now, all the different vendors parse it out differently. It's this much for the doctor, and $4.99 for the EHR for the first doctor, and half of that for the second doctor, and $130 a month for e-prescribing, and this add-on is here. No matter how they slice it, it always ends up being somewhere between $700 and $1,200 a month. So a savvy doctor or practice manager will say, the stimulus payment for Medicare, and the vast majority of physicians are going to go Medicare. Very few will go Medicaid. There'll be some. You need to know about that too, but mostly Medicare. $44,000 per physician over a 5-year period is the stimulus payment. So let's see. I'm going to pay this much here. Maybe I'm going to pay $38,000 for my system, and then I'm going to pay $18,000 a year. But I'm going to have the system. And some doctors still think having that means it's a lot more private and secure. I typically get them over that concept pretty quickly, because they can't have the kind of security that a hosted system would have. But if I go over here and I get the SaaS model, I'm going to be paying every month. And eventually that $44,000 is going to be gone, and I'm still going to be paying every month. Aside from the fact that, if you've got an end user license, you're still probably paying maintenance and upgrades every month. But they have in their head, I'm paying a subscription. This area, if you are doing your billing externally and you bring it internally, that's going to make the difference. That's going to pay for your software every single month. So that is a great way to overcome that objection that says, yeah, I see software as a service, or either objection. You're going to get some of that monthly cost back by recapturing what you're paying a third-party billing company. Not to mention, you're avoiding the undercoding and reducing your costs, and hopefully you're getting an electronic funds transfer, so there's some upside there too. So this is a really important area for you guys to dig into and be conversant on, because a lot of your value proposition is going to come out of the revenue cycle management side. Then there's a question of, then reporting is the next function, and you want to be able to report by the individual provider, meaning the clinician, by your insurance company, so you can see what's happening there, because many small practices do not do what they should be doing around monitoring their individual contracts, insurance company to insurance company, and making sure that they're getting what is in the contract for the services they're providing, and then later going back and negotiating better rates with that insurance company. So the ability to parse the data and report by payer is really important. And again, it's more ROI on this investment. You want to report by diagnosis, and you want to report by procedure as well. I would guess, from my experience, only about 10% of doctors are really conversant in the business management side of their business. The vast majority just want to practice medicine, but a few really pay attention to what's going on in the practice, and the way to find them is to ask them, what are your top 3 procedure codes, and roughly how much are you bringing in per month against those procedure codes? And if the doc can answer that question, you got somebody you're going to really enjoy working with, because they're going to love every benefit you can bring to them with an EHR product. Labs and diagnostic orders is another section of the blueprint you want to think about. And again, it's because some of this is being mandated, not mandated, some of this is required in order to be a meaningful user of a certified EHR system and receive your incentive payment. And by the way, the Medicare incentive is $44,000 per physician over 5 years. If you qualify